All right, all right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to another episode here in your Verano 1711 podcast, where we like to discuss everything related to religion, biblical studies, scholars, books, because we're bookish people. You already know that. And because that's very important, but critically analyze it, that's even more important. Today, we are joined by a special guest. We're going to be discussing his book on the big guy. Enough about angels, good guys. We need to give some praise to the bad guys. So we have a special guest for today. But before, I just want to talk to my co-host, Joshua. How are you doing today?
Hello, Mark. How are you? I'm happy to be here again. Having a while actually, and well, it's a good news because I didn't knew that I will have the luck to meet the author of one of my favorite books. By the moment, I mean, I'm saying that this one was a surprise, but yes, come with me, and I'm here, and I hope that we're gonna learn a lot about the bad guys. It's gonna be interesting because I have a couple of questions. I don't know if I'm sure there's only the bad guys who bears his name.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, with that, we wanted to introduce everybody. Our guest with us, Dr. Ryan Stokes. Sir, how are you? Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to talk with you all about this and appreciate the opportunity to tell you about my book.
That would be fun. The first time I saw the book, I was discussing that with my friends, and they were like, "You need to do some interview with this author, Dr. Stokes. This book is quite top notch, and it is prefaced. I think it's endorsed by a couple of really good scholars, with really prominent scholars. To begin with, John J. Collins. He's been on the show previously as well, and he recommended the book, so why not? We had to. But before getting into the questions, before Dr. Stokes, just give us a little bit of background, who you are, what you do, where you teach, that kind of background, so people who are not aware of your work, they can have an idea where you're coming from.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you guys. My name is Ryan Stokes. I teach Old Testament and am the Associate Dean of the School of Biblical and Theological Studies at Carson Newman University, which is a Christian university connected with the Tennessee Baptist Convention. We're located in Jefferson City, East Tennessee, in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains. So it's kind of the Garden of Eden here. I watch out for serpents as I'm traveling
I
around
like
here.
that. That's a good reference. Quite a good reference right there. Yeah, I did a little bit dig before talking, reaching out to you. You went and studied at Yale, am I right?
I sure did. I
Yeah.
did my undergrad at Western Kentucky University, then seminary at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, then did my PhD at Yale University. So I studied with John Collins. So he and I go way back.
Wow, look at that, Joshua. What do you think about that? I mean, he studied with John J. Collins, so they have something there. So no surprise, right there. He endorsed the book, definitely,
No,
definitely.
I
Yeah.
mean it is a surprise, but at the same time, it's not so much because like we say, in the scholarship, the world is really small. Everybody knows it.
Yeah. It's a very small
So
world. Yeah, they
I
get
did
attached to it.
realize a few days ago. I remember I told you I bought a book from Mark Smith, and I realized one of my best friend in Edinburgh. He was his student, so it's like okay,
Wow,
you know who
look at
is.
that. Okay, guys, let's jump right in. I just want to show up the first question, Dr. Stokes, on the screen. So every book has a story. I personally, I like reading books. I like reading everything academic. I'm all of that, but writing is not my cup of tea. I think it's outside my wheelhouse. So heads off to you guys who spend wow, it's a very difficult and very complex process. Writing a book, it takes a lot of parts to be put together. So please just give us a little bit like a story how this book came about. This book about Satan.
Yes. So as you mentioned, I was working on my PhD at Yale University, and part of earning a PhD is writing a dissertation, which is
Hmm.
essentially a big scholarly book. And I wanted to write on the story of the fallen angels in early Judaism.
Mm,
Use that story as a window into the problem of evil as Jewish theologians were discussing it in the 3rd century BC to the 1st century AD, roughly speaking. But as I got more and more into the dissertation, what I discovered is that the real controversy in early Judaism about the problem of evil wasn't so much in the question of fallen angels, or they were part of the discussion. But the real debate was over what Satan's role in evil was, and what the role
mhm.
of evil spirits was in evil. And so it turned into a study of Satan and to a slightly lesser extent demons and evil spirits. It was an interesting book. The biggest challenge to writing this book probably was when I got ready to finish it, and I was getting ready to send the manuscript to Erdman's, and who published the book in English, and I realized that I needed to dedicate the book to someone. And my wife, I thought I would always dedicate my first book to my wife, but my wife didn't want a book
Good.
on Satan dedicated to her.
Yeah.
And so when I finally, I'm a Christian. You asked me who I'm a Christian as well. So I thought, well, I'll dedicate the book to Jesus because my faith is important to me. And so I thought I would
Yeah.
dedicate the book to Jesus. And so I wrote a dedication to Jesus in the book, sent it off to Erdman's. About a year later, I get the author's copies of the book in the mail, and I open it up, and I'm thumbing through the book, looking at the making sure the table of contents is the way that it is, all the chapters are in place, no typos, and it's all there. But I noticed there was no dedication in the book. Erdman's had left out the dedication, and so what I finally figured out is
Oh.
that not even Jesus wanted a book on Satan dedicated to him. So that's a funny story
Hey.
about how the book came about.
Thank you. Thank you. Kind of makes sense. Kind of makes sense. Well, we are Christians as well. But we strongly believe that the academic study of the Bible should not be an obstacle to our faith. All the opposite. It should strengthen our faith, teach us to be better thinkers about our faith. Uh, but and as you know, in many church contexts, the intellectual side of our faith may be dismissed. That's unfortunate, but we strongly believe what we need to push back against that kind of a view, because intellect and faith can go hand in hand. We strongly believe in that. I mean, Paul, you tell us, Paul was an intellectual. He was an academic of his time, and yeah, he worked by side by side with his faith. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I agree completely. One of the things I tell my students, as a matter of fact, we just finished classes here at Carson Newman, and one of the last things that I tell them at the end of the semester is that there are a lot of people out there that think you can either have faith and not intellect, or you can have intellect and not have faith. And I really want to challenge them to have both intellect and faith. They can
Hmm.
believe very passionately, but also use their minds to the best of their God-given ability.
Oh, I agree with that. I entirely. Do you agree with that, Joshua?
Yes, yes. I
Definitely.
mean,
Okay. Let's put up the first question here on the screen, Dr. Stokes. So in the first chapter, you write about the origin of the Satan, and that's very important. That definite article right before the word the Satan. What are some takeaways from this section of your book?
Sure. So one of the things I wanted to do with this book is look at what the biblical texts actually say about Satan, and to the best of my ability, not import some of my own ideas. A lot of things that some of the books that are written on Satan, one mistake that's common in these books is that they'll come to the biblical text and they'll read into it later theological notions. And so what I wanted to do is start at the beginning, and for me, that would be the Old Testament passages. These are the earliest texts that we know of that mention a Satan-like figure, or mention the Satan, as you pointed out a moment ago. And I started there and did my best not to read later theological, later Jewish, later Christian
Hmm.
ideas into it. And as a matter of fact, I started very fundamentally with what the Hebrew word Satan, where we get the word Satan, what does that word mean? And what I found when I looked at all of the uses of that Hebrew word in the Old Testament, what I discovered is that word refers to someone who seeks to harm someone else, someone who would harm someone else physically or engage in physical violence, or at least intend to engage in physical violence. And so what I propose in the book is that the best translation of the word Satan is not the name Satan. It's just a noun. It's not a name. It's not even adversary or accuser, as you might read in some other books. But the best translation of the word is something more like attacker, someone who attacks
Hmm.
someone else. The other thing that I learned is that in certain contexts, this attacker is someone who has legal authorization. He's attacking a criminal on behalf of a king or another authority, and in that case, he's trying to kill the person. And the best translation is executioner. So the word Satan or the word Satan in Hebrew means attacker or executioner. And in
Hmm.
the Old Testament, where we encounter this primary attacker executioner called the Hasatan in Hebrew, or the Satan, he's the executioner or the attacker, someone who punishes, harms, or even puts to death sinners on God's behalf. He actually works for
Hmm.
God, punishing sinners.
Hmm. That's a quite distinction. I've been reading that kind of translation or epithet. But that's a new thing coming from your book. I think that's intentional on your part, right? Make sure that that's a different in terms of semantics. That's a different thing that we're getting there. Talking about endorsements, blurbs. That's part of the writing a book, and it's you tell us you are the author. Is that complicated to get blurbs from people because they are very busy?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been asked to write blurbs for books myself, and I'm happy to do it. Although in some cases I can't. There are books that maybe they're not the quality that I would want to endorse, or maybe they're politically problematic reasons to endorse a book. In my case, I was able to get some really high quality scholars to endorse it, whether it deserved
Oh
it or
yeah,
not.
yeah.
And so really happy with the scholars who are willing to endorse my book, and grateful for their kind words about it.
Yeah, and we're about to see some of them, but let's go with the big one here. And the big one has to do
I,
with. Go ahead, Joshua. You were about to
I,
say something.
you hear me?
Yeah, I can
Yes,
hear
no,
you.
I did realize something. I did realize something kind of funny. Uh, is as the doctor is explaining, it's very nice to understand now why he put it his executor net, but in Spanish they didn't put that probably because it would sound really bad. They say the transformation of the servant to enemy of God. So uh, maybe it was what's the name? Maybe it was a marketing strategy, but it makes more sense in English.
It might be the case. That was a marketing movement. Yeah, it was a
Yes.
marketing move right there. So we got here, Professor John J. Collins, and he says Ryan Stokes has done a masterful job in showing how the understanding of Satan developed in the biblical tradition. In so doing, he uncovers different nuances in the phenomena of temptation, sin, and life threatening evil that have beset humanity since ancient times and are still very much with us today. Look at that. Dr. Stokes, what do you think about that review?
Better than I deserve.
Yeah.
John he's a very kind man, and an
Oh,
incredible
yeah.
scholar. And I will say this: I am a better scholar for having studied with John Collins than I would have been had I gone a lot of other places to do my PhD. And now, having said that, there are lots of imperfections in my scholarship, and I take credit for those, not John. Uh, but I'm certainly a better scholar having studied with him than I would have been otherwise. He has very high standards.
I agree. I agree. And that's what the scholarship is all about. It sharpens iron, sharpens iron. And we need to, because we got the blind spots and we can see them. So some others can go and see them and feel the boy in that way. So let's check some other here. We got Sidney Crawford, Professor Sidney Crawford. Um, she says Stokes has written the most thorough treatment of Satan in ancient Jewish literature to date. How about that? Beginning in the Hebrew Bible, continuing with the Dead Sea Scrolls and other Second Temple period literature, And concluding with the New Testament, Stokes masterfully chronicles the development of the figure of Satan from God's executioner to God's enemy, the definitive handbook for years to come. Wow, that's a good one. I like that one. Let's check another one here. Carol Newson from Emory University. Ryan Stokes provides an exceptionally careful, thorough, and exegetically perceptive reconsideration of all the significant texts that refer to the Satan and related figures in biblical and Second Temple literature. This is an essential item for the bookshelf of any serious student. Pay attention to that, people. Any serious student of the symbolism of evil in biblical and early Jewish literature. I will be studying it carefully and consulting it often. Wow. I like that one. I like that one. I got another one here. So from another big guy. So pay attention to this one. So Professor Stockenbrock from University of Munich. In this timely and very readable book, Ryan Stokes takes us on a journey that highlights how evil in Second Temple Judaism from the Hebrew Bible through the New Testament could become understood as an active force in the world that undermines the well-being of God's people. This treatment of Satan is anything but one-sided. Discourse about a prominent inimical power-wielding being is balanced by examination of texts and underscore human responsibility, sometimes in ways that complement rather than cancel each other out. Finally, readers will find here much to ponder, and they will learn that this topic is so important for Judeo-Christian perceptions of divine activity in the face of overwhelming corruption, irreparable consequences of wrongdoing, and inexplicable suffering. Okay, I got another one here. You know, it's a lot. It's a lot of review here, Dr. Stokes, and we just want to make sure our audience is aware of that. We got Professor Vanderkam. Oh, by the way, Vanderkam was 2 days ago on the show talking about calendars and Dead Sea Scrolls. So let's see what he has to say about your book. Ryan Stokes offers a thorough analysis of the ways in which Satan and other evil beings function in the wider biblical tradition. He deserves strong commendation for the careful, balanced, and enlightening way in which he has handled a large topic that touches directly upon basic issues, such as the origin and nature of evil. Okay, so Dr. Stokes, any comments on that, please? It would be good to hear from you.
Those are my heroes. I haven't read those in a while. I was really excited. Those came in from the publisher before the book came out, and I got to see those in advance. And those are my heroes. Steckenbrock, Collins, Vanderkam, Crawford. Those Newsom. Some of the best scholars in the field, and,
yep.
They were very kind to endorse my book.
Yeah, I think Craig Evans also endorsed it, right? Craig Evans, and I think then Daniel Harlow, I think it is the other one.
Right. He did
if I'm
as
not
well.
mistaken. Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's move on. Joshua, any comments so far?
Bueno, talking about the Satan figure is something I really interesting on the book. Obviously, I'm very agree with what many scholars have been saying. One of the things I found intriguing, I don't know if I can add it to kind of question, it's just a commentary, but it's
Sure.
about probably Christians will say, I know because I hear that quite often in some studies. Mark knows this. I teach in a channel in a school called Alexandria, Escuela de Alexandria, and my area is divinity. So I teach something, everything related to the divine council, angels, demons, all that. So obviously the figure of Satan always is intriguing me because it's quite a mystery somehow. But in that case, I can say that how do you realize that we have to talk about Satan? Is because so many Christians will say that, well, Satan, who wants to know about that guy? Well, I want to, because I have many questions. I've been on the divine council for a while, and always I say like, okay, this is this guy again. I need to check this. So my question is quite simple. Why do you focus on that character? What catch your attention there?
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to explain that. You know, the, I didn't set out to write about Satan. I didn't say, you know what, I want to write about evil and Satan. It just kind of evolved that way naturally as I'm doing my studies. As a matter of fact, not long ago, I was contacted by a publisher for a new encyclopedia on the Dead Sea Scrolls that is being written, and I was invited to write an article on evil in the Dead Sea Scrolls for this encyclopedia. And I accepted. Then a few weeks later, I was contacted again, and they said, we need someone to write the article on God as well. Will you write the article on God? And this is outside of my research. I haven't done a lot of research into the figure of God in the ancient world, but I thought about it. And after some reflection, I decided to accept that offer because I was worried, are people going to wonder what team I'm playing for? Are they going to wonder why I'm writing about evil and Satan and demons all the time? And so I thought it would be good for me to write on God as well.
Yeah.
Write on the good guys a little bit. But it's interesting. I think it's helpful. Well, I've told you guys that I'm a Christian myself. And as a Christian, all of the Bible is important to me. And so I hope that what I have is not an unhealthy interest in evil, an unhealthy or an unhelpful interest in the causes of evil in the world, but it stems largely from my interest in the Bible in general, my interest in all scripture and all God's revelation. And this is part of it. One of the things that the Bible tells us about is Satan, and it tells us about angels and evil spirits and demons as well. And so this stems from my larger interest in all of Revelation, and that's why I write on this.
Thank you. All right, let's move on here because we want to respect Dr. Stokes' time. So, question number 2: how are we to understand the Satan in the book of Job?
Yeah, Job is such a fascinating book.
I know.
One of the things that perhaps distinguishes my study of Satan from others is that I don't start with the book of Job. Job is, as far as the Old Testament goes, Job is one of the most familiar books that pertains to Satan. And so a lot of people, when they begin to talk about Satan, they begin with the book of Job. And I don't do that for a couple of reasons. One is I want to look at the passages in the Old Testament where it's really clear what's going on with the word Satan and with the figure of Satan, and deal with the complex passages once I've studied the figure and the passages that are clearer, that are easier to understand. I also think that Job is probably, the passages in Job that pertain to Satan are some of the later passages in the Old Testament that talk about this figure. And so I wanted to deal with thinking with texts on Satan in chronological order, so I can see how these ideas develop over time. And so that's why I deal with Job second and not the beginning. So first I deal with what does the word Satan mean, and what can we say about the origins of Satan in the Old Testament, and then what can we say about the book of Job. And what I discovered, I suppose the main thing that I discovered about Job is that Job is the first passage in the Old Testament, and the only passage in the Old Testament, I think, where Satan attacks an innocent person. So in Job, you have the familiar Satan that we've already talked about in the Old Testament, where he's the person who attacks sinners on behalf of God or punishes sinners. But what you have in Job that is novel is that in Job, for the first time, and what's special about Job is that God gives Satan permission to attack an innocent person. If you're not familiar with the story of Job, Job is the most righteous person in the world. He's also the wealthiest person in the world, and Satan and God make an arrangement to test whether Job really is righteous, just out of sincere devotion to God, and not simply righteous because he's being blessed by God. And so God gives Satan permission to treat Job like he's a sinner, even though Job's not a sinner. And they're seeing how is Job going to respond to this. And Job comes through with flying colors for the most part. He handles it well and is faithful to God even after he's tested. But what's really neat there is that Satan attacks someone who doesn't deserve it for the very first time in all literature that we have. And that opens the door for so much of later thinking on Satan. One of the things that's going to become fundamental to thinking about Satan in later Judaism and in Christianity is that Satan isn't just the enemy of the wicked, but he's the enemy of the righteous as well. And that begins in Job, where Satan for the first time causes trouble for someone who's righteous, who's completely innocent.
Hmm. Hmm. Joshua, any comments?
No,
I mean, this is
actually,
a topic that
I
we're familiar with this topic and Job and Satan. Yeah.
yes, I mean, I can say that Dr. Stokes, I have two commentaries on the book of Job, the Marvin Pope commentaries right here. Ooh, this one. That's probably very famous.
Mm-hmm. The
And
Anchor Bible. Yeah.
Thank
of the
you. Yes,
Anchor
great, man.
Bible.
Yeah.
And I have the Julio Trébole book of Job here. I can say this is the most, at least for me, the most accurate translation of Job in Spanish and in English. Why? Because they are not scared to jump into the mythological language. In that case, I can say that both of them had something really interesting when they refer to Satan, because they always go around to this. They translate it sometimes the adversary, and they try to make it clear that the concept is quite related to this idea of the divine counsel's accuser, someone who is supposed to put into challenge. So here's where I have a kind of particular question. Marv knows that. One of my favorite psalms, but at the same time, it's one of the most complex for me, is Psalm 82. And well, we know it's a divine council meeting, but the point is, it may look like, I don't know if I'm right, but I see many scholars who are quite agree with me that there is God who is the accuser. He's God who is the Satan, because he's accusing the other God. So my question is, what do you think about it?
That's interesting. You do have God who's in Psalm 82, where God is serving both as the accuser and judge of these other divine beings. It's a really fascinating passage. It doesn't use the word Satan or Satan there, but you could make a case that God is fulfilling that sort of role, even though the word's not being used. Although along those lines, Joshua, in Numbers 22, that's the story of Balaam. That's one of the first passages I talk about in the first chapter of the book.
Yes.
There you have the angel of the Lord.
Yes.
And in the Old Testament, in several passages where it mentions the angel of the Lord is actually God himself. And there the angel of the Lord is referred to as a Satan. This angel of the Lord comes out. The sorcerer or prophet Balaam is on his way to curse Israel. And God is protecting Israel, and so the angel of the Lord comes out, and he stands in Balaam's way with a sword, ready to execute him if he approaches. Now, it's a really interesting story where his donkey that Balaam is riding on, he avoids this angel and saves Balaam's life. But there you have the angel of the Lord, who is explicitly called a Satan, as a Satan.
Yeah,
now, that doesn't mean that God is Satan. That's not what's being said here. But the word Satan, I think it means attacker or executioner, and there the angel of the Lord has come out to be an executioner to kill Balaam if he insists on cursing Israel.
So
that fits really well what you were saying.
I agree. I mean, he's not Satan ontologically, because that's beyond any sensible. It wouldn't make sense at all, at least to me. But he's just playing the role. He's taking the office. He is like opposing, in this case, Balaam, and the donkey is, hey, dude, can't you see it? It's right there. I'm stopping myself. I won't walk any longer, because that's the guy there with the sword, the drone sword, and I don't want to mess with that guy. So I need to talk to you. But I agree with you. It's not like God is Satan ontologically. It's just playing the role. Luckily I have a clip here regarding that story in Numbers. So for people, many people, they go more like visual and not theory. So this goes for them, definitely.
Yeah, great job having that picture handy, ready to go.
Thank you, sir. Let's move on here with the third question. We're doing correct here. All right. So Chapter 3 deals with demons, those guys, blacky guys, and evil spirits, falling angels, human sin, and more. So tell us in what ways this host of characters relate to the figure and development of the Satan.
That's right. This passage in some way, or this chapter in some ways, is a parenthesis, in that I stopped talking about Satan for just a
Mm,
moment to talk about
okay.
some of these other figures. Angels, the sons of God, demons, evil spirits. Uh, but the reason that I do that is because these figures, they figure, they play into the conversation about Satan very prominently, beginning around the 3rd century BC. In ancient Israel, Satan wasn't the only superhuman figure that they believed in. Satan wasn't the only figure that was invisible but caused problems for humanity in the theology of ancient Israel. And so I kind of catch readers up on what's going on in beliefs about these angels and demons at this time. But I'm also setting the stage for the fact that these characters are going to end up relating very directly with Satan. Uh, the evil spirits are going to end up working for Satan in this
Yeah,
literature.
yeah.
And thinking about evil spirits is going to influence thinking about Satan. So I talk about a couple of texts in particular, um, in this chapter of the book. One of them is the 3rd century BC Book of the Watchers.
Oh, yeah.
It is part of the larger collection of works known as First Enoch.
Hmm.
And this particular section of it was written in the 3rd century, or very likely in the 3rd century BC, and it tells the story. It's based on Genesis 6. If you're familiar with the story of the sons of God who marry human women and have these giant, or these incredible warrior offspring with them, in
Hmm.
Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. And the book of the Watchers expands on that story and talks about these fallen angels, and says that what these fallen angels did, these, what it calls them, watchers, that's why it's called the book of the Watchers, says these fallen angels were
Hmm.
watchers, marry human women. In doing this, they are rebelling against God. They do all kinds of other things as well. They teach humans how to practice sorcery and divination, and other sorts of sinful practices. But one of the things we learn in this passage, in addition to the fact that these angels have rebelled against God, what we learn is that the children of these angels, who are kind of half angel and half human, they're these hybrid offspring, these offspring become evil spirits. And so we have in
Mm.
this story the origin of evil spirits. What we also learn in the book of the Watchers is that these fallen angels, these angels who rebel against God, they get imprisoned as punishment for their sin. And these angels are the demons that other nations of the world besides Israel, these other nations worship. And a couple
Mm.
of really interesting things going on here. One is we have the explanation for where demons come from and where evil spirits come from. Another thing that's interesting is that demons and evil spirits aren't the same thing. In some literature, such as the New Testament Gospels, evil spirits and demons, those are synonymous. An evil spirit is the same thing as a demon, and a demon is the same thing as an evil spirit. But in this text, the Book of the Watchers, evil spirits and demons are actually different things. Demons are fallen angels that are worshipped by nations idolatrously. So if you're ancient Israel and you say, well, why do the Phoenicians worship a different god, or why do the Babylonians worship different gods? And the Jews at this time said, well, they're actually worshiping these fallen angels who are demons. Um,
Mm.
the other thing that we see is that evil spirits, they're not the angels that are worshipped by these nations. The evil spirits are the children of these angels who are out and
Hmm.
about in the
Yep.
world,
Yep.
harming people physically, and sometimes leading people to sin. And so there's lots of really interesting things going on here. And eventually, what they conclude is that the nations of the world are worshiping these imprisoned sinful angels
Hmm.
called demons, and that these demons' children are evil spirits who are making people sick, are killing people, and are leading people to sin by worshiping their parents, these angels, these demons.
Gotcha. Thank you. Joshua, any comments?
Yes, I mean, well, this is a lot. This is a lot of my of my matter. And that's something I like it because I like to speak with people who have this concept quite clear. Um, eh, well, my question is quite hard in in this point, but I mean I want to do it. You know, many people who I speak with, mostly this morning that we were speaking with Dr. Andy about the chaos. We were speaking about the Leviathan, basically. Some people found out that the Leviathan somehow is Satan. I don't see that connection, but I know that some people suggest that because they match the Leviathan imagery with the dragon of Revelation chapter 12. So my point here is like I receive always often two questions, and I have my own. But the two questions, one that people do is the serpent who appears there. This dragon is the same snake of Genesis 3. I don't see the connection either, but they asked that. But basically, my question is most related to the figure itself. I see this dragon had seven heads, and every head have a crown. So I'm the one who think that, for example, we find out that the Second Temple literature don't have one Satan; they have many. They have like Mastema, they have Belial, they have well many. So my question here is probably this figure in Revelation chapter 12 is suggesting plenty a group, probably a kind of head, like a kind of evil cosmic, like Godhead, but this case is evil represented by these seven heads. They are this plural concept of Satan in the Christianity, Dr. Stokes. That's my question.
Sure. Yeah, I would have. That's a very good question, and I haven't done a lot of thinking about the number of heads of the dragon in Revelation. You certainly have a beast with seven heads in also in Revelation, and lots of numbers. And for apocalyptic literature, it's not unusual to have beasts that's a combination of different animals, or they have multiple heads or multiple wings, things that you don't see in animals on Earth, at least. I know that the dragon is associated with Rome, especially through the one of the beasts in Revelation, where the dragon or the beast is associated with Rome, and Rome sits on seven hills, and so the number seven could relate to that. Seven is an important number in Revelation, otherwise as well. I think that in Revelation, I'm not sure that John, in writing Revelation, was thinking of there being multiple Satans. I think he's thinking of there being one Satan. But Satan certainly is a very fearful, frightening thing that John wants his readers to be aware of, and he depicts this figure in a very frightening manner, and connects him with previous figures in the Old Testament. So this idea of Satan being a serpent, that seems to connect Satan not only with Satan in the Old Testament, but also with the serpent of Genesis 3, and also with Leviathan. So if you were to ask the author of Psalms or any of the other passages in the Old Testament that mention Leviathan, are you talking about Satan here? They would probably say no. But if you go to John and say,
Yeah.
why do you describe Satan as a dragon? He would say, well, Satan is really scary. He's a very powerful enemy of God, and I want to use these Old Testament images to communicate that to the churches. And that's probably what's going on in Revelation, where he's using these Old Testament images. John also uses Balaam, that sorcerer we just mentioned, to describe false teachers in the church. He uses Jezebel, a very wicked queen from ancient Israel, to describe false teaching in churches. He calls Rome, he actually doesn't call Rome Rome, he refers to Rome as Babylon. And so
Yeah.
John is using these Old Testament images, these Old Testament figures, to characterize these threats to the church that he's talking to in the first century. And so he's using Leviathan or Rahab, another serpent from the Old Testament, as well as the serpent from Genesis 3, to describe Satan. That seems to be the way John is composing the book of Revelation, borrowing these Old Testament images to describe the topics that he's talking about.
Thank you, Dr. Stokes. For our audience, if you want to take away like some concepts, we got some extract here. Let me see. This one is on the preface. So Dr. Stokes says, he writes, this book is a history of the origin, shaping, and reshaping of beliefs about Satan figures. Sorry, I need to go back here. And about Satan, it traces the development of ideas pertaining to these figures from their earliest literary manifestations in the Hebrew scriptures to the very depictions of Satan, the Satan, and his evil forces in the Jewish and Christian literature of the late Second Temple period. So there you have it. This is, I think this is a good summary. I don't know what you think, Dr. Stokes. Then you go on and write. It explains the genesis of this tradition as evidence in the Hebrew scriptures and describes the interpretive and creative process that transform an agent of Yahweh into the preeminent antagonist and arch enemy of good, about whom one reads in works such as Revelation. In particular, it follows the evolution of the tradition as the idea of a heavenly Satan figure is brought into conversation with different aspects of the problem of the evil. And as this figure little by little receives the blame for all that is wrong in the world. And I remember reading there as well that the authors they were quite imaginative, adding some very peculiar ideas about this being. They are using their creativity to transform this being. So there's much speculation. Can we go as far as to say that, Dr. Stokes? They're speculating, trying to make sense what is going on in the world.
I think a lot of the biblical literature, it's 66 different writings. If you're Protestant, if you're Catholic, you have a few more. The and many authors, and they're trying to make sense of their own day, and they're looking to the previous scriptures that have been written. So if you're writing Revelation, the author of Revelation is reading Isaiah, he's reading Zechariah, he's reading Exodus, he's reading Daniel, and trying to make sense of what's going on in his own day, borrowing ideas from these texts. And as I mentioned, I'm a Christian, so I believe they do make sense of what was going
Yeah.
on in their own day, and can help us make sense of what's going on in our day as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Joshua, I don't know if you got any comments. So we can proceed to the fourth question. Let me know. Okay.
No, I don't have at the moment. I probably will jump with my last question later, but I want to keep it.
Okay. Perfect. We're doing good here with the time. So the fourth question, Dr. Stokes. What can we know about Mastema, Belial, and Melchirisha? Did I pronounce that right? Melchirisha. Do we have a unified portrait of them at all? In what sources can they be found?
Yeah. Thanks for asking about this. A lot of people aren't even familiar with these characters. These are characters, for the most part, who do not appear in the Bible. Belial, I believe, is mentioned in 2 Corinthians. That's the only place where you get Belial or Belial. It's actually a Hebrew word that relates in some way to death or to Sheol, or is often associated with wickedness. In the Old Testament, we have the expression sons of Belial or sons of worthlessness. Depending on what translation you're reading, it may say worthless persons, but these are bad guys if they're sons of Belial. The word mastema means hostility. There's a book written in the 2nd century BC relating to what I was saying a moment ago, the book of Jubilees. This book, written in the 2nd century BC, it takes the idea of fallen angels, evil spirits, and demons, and brings it into conversation with Satan, and where Satan is the leader of the evil spirits and the leader of the demons. But Satan in this text is generally not called Satan. There's one passage that seems to refer to Satan as the Satan or Hasatan, the Satan. But otherwise in this book, it refers to Satan as the prince of Mastema, or the prince of hostility. And this, it seems to be talking about Satan, the same Satan that we've been talking about. If you ask Jubilees, who are you talking about? Are you talking about the same person that Job was talking about? The author of Jubilees would probably say, yes, I'm talking about that same guy. As a matter of fact, the book of Jubilees retells the story of Abraham's near sacrifice of Isaac, or the binding of Isaac, based on Genesis 22, in terms that are really similar to Job, where Satan goes to God and says, hey, you can't know if Abraham really loves you unless you have him sacrifice his son. So that's where this challenge to Abraham, or this test to sacrifice Isaac, comes
Mm.
from. But Satan in this text is referred to as the prince of Mastema, the prince of hostility, because this is the person who is hostile toward sinners, or hostile toward God's people even. There are certain Dead Sea Scrolls, on the other hand, if you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, their favorite name for Satan is Belial, because in the Dead Sea
Yeah.
Scrolls, once we get to the Dead Sea Scrolls, they're thinking of Satan still as the person who punishes sinners and causes trouble for people, but they're thinking even more of Satan as the person who tempts people to sin. So Satan doesn't just cause trouble for sinners by punishing them, but he even tempts them to sin. And so, given Satan's role in sin and wickedness, their favorite name for Satan is Belial, or which is a word that means wickedness.
Mhm.
Another name for Satan in these texts, it's a little less common, but still appears, is Melchirasha, or king of wickedness. And so here again is
Wow.
another word for Satan that seems to emphasize his role in wickedness. I think now that some scholars think that what we have in the Dead Sea Scrolls are different Satan figures, one called Mastema, one called Belial, and
Mhm.
one called Melchirasha. I think based on certain commonalities between these figures and these texts, that they probably are talking about the same person. That if you were to read, if you were to ask one of the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls that talks about Belial, such as the Damascus document, are you talking about Satan here? He would probably say yes. Are you talking about Mastema here, the Prince of Mastema? He'd say, yeah, I'm talking about the same person. But they're choosing different names for this figure to emphasize different aspects of his work. And some cases to emphasize his hostility toward humankind, and in other cases to emphasize the fact that Satan is primarily someone who's leading people to sin.
Yeah, I need to ask you about this guy, Makiri Shah, because reading articles here and there, it looks kind
Yes.
of it kind of looks to me that they are all, not always, that would be too categorical on my part, but almost always they are both paired with Melchizedek. Is that an accident, or is that intentional? What's going on?
In one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, it talks about this heavenly Melchizedek figure. Melchizedek's a figure that we meet in the early chapters of Genesis. We also read about Melchizedek in one of the Psalms. Then Hebrews, the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, talks about Melchizedek, comparing Jesus to Melchizedek, who's this priest, also a king of Salem, that Abraham actually tithes to. So this important but mysterious figure, we only see him in Genesis, in the book of Genesis, and then we don't see him anymore, except this reference to him in Psalms, and then again in Hebrews, which compares Jesus to Melchizedek. But we do get this story, this whole text, it seems, in the Dead Sea Scrolls that is devoted to Melchizedek, interpreting him as this heavenly angelic figure. And we also see this Melchirasha elsewhere in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And what scholars have posited is that Melchizedek, which means in Hebrew king of righteousness or righteous king, that his counterpart, his mortal enemy, so to speak, would be this figure who's called Melchirasha, which means king of wickedness. And that makes sense because you have these opposite names, one king of righteousness and one king of wickedness. And so that's why those two names are often paired together in scholarly discussions. I think I've lost your sound there, Marv.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Good.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I muted myself. Joshua, any comments to that about Melchizedek, Melchizedek, Belial, Mastema?
From me.
Yes,
Hello?
go
Hello?
ahead. I can hear you.
Okay, okay. Fine. Yeah. No, nice. It's just sometimes he appears. I'm collecting some questions from my students, doctor. Sorry if I'm looking down. Just like it's because they don't speak English, some of them, so I have to know which one I have to take. There could be no hard to. Well, specifically about Melchizedek, recently I was reading a book of based on this notion of the two powers in heaven of Alan Siegel, but this case is Peter Schaeffer, actually the most recent work about it, the two gods in heaven. And I did realize, not exactly Melchizedek, but mostly the Son of God of 4Q 246, I think. Uh, is a really enigmatic figure. What do you think about it? It does a good, a bad guy, does the Messiah, does Jesus.
That's a great question. That's an interesting Aramaic text in 4Q246 called the Son of God text. When I was a PhD student, I had to translate that as part of my Aramaic exam. I
Wow.
was given that text to translate among some others, and it's really interesting. I'm not sure how familiar Joshua, your students, are with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Unfortunately,
A lot.
most Dead Sea Scrolls are very fragmentary, and so we just have little bits and pieces of a lot of these texts. And unfortunately for us, this fascinating text, we only have little bits of it. And so we have this little fragment that talks about someone who will be called the Son of God. And one of the things that's so fascinating about this text is it sounds a whole lot like what is said about Jesus in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, I believe. I believe it's Gospel of Luke chapter 1 when Gabriel appears to Mary, and so this is a very timely. I'm not sure when this podcast is going to go public, but a very timely text for this Christmas season. And so we have this Aramaic text from the Dead Sea Scrolls describing someone in words that sound a whole lot like the way Gabriel describes Jesus to Mary in the Gospel of Luke. One of the things that causes scholars to scratch their heads about this text is, though, as we're trying to piece this fragmentary text together and make sense of it, it looks like this text appears in a place in this document where it would be describing an evil figure and not a good figure. And so we have this language of a text where a person is going to be great and called the Son of God. That sounds like the way Jesus is described, but it's in this text that where we would expect an evil figure. And so scholars are divided on whether do we take its context or its apparent context, even though it's tentative in this fragmentary text. Do we take that as our guide and say that this must be an evil figure? Or do we look at this text and say, well, this sounds a whole lot like the way the Gospel of Luke speaks about the Messiah, so this must be a good figure here. And scholars disagree about that. I kind of like interpreting it as a positive figure, given the incredible similarities between this text and what's said about Jesus in the Gospel of Luke. But given the fragmentary state of the manuscript, it's hard to be certain.
There you go. More questions. The answer. Yeah, definitely. I think Joshua is having some connections issues.
Well, as an extension of the question.
Joshua, could you repeat your question because you were breaking up?
Second. Hello?
Yeah, you were breaking up. Can you repeat your question, please?
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
You hear me?
Yes, you were breaking up.
Yes, you hear me now, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's just that great. That's my extension of the question is that if we look at as a positive figure, but do we think he's human or not?
That's a great question. Is he human? It's been a while.
Oh, you don't hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
It has been a while since I've read that text. He will be called a son of the Most High. I'm trying to think that expression in the Old Testament. So you have sons of the Most High in Psalm 82, the psalm you mentioned earlier, and there it does seem to be referring to a divine being. In Luke, it's referring to a human being, but one who's conceived in a very special way. When we talk about divine sonship, when we hear the expression "Son of God" in the Bibles, the Old Testament in particular, often those sons of God are angelic beings. I'm thinking of not numbers. I'm thinking of Genesis chapter 6, which we mentioned earlier, Deuteronomy 32, Psalm 82, Job 1 through 2. Sometimes in the Old Testament, however, divine sonship, that language is used to refer to the Davidic king. So in 2 Samuel 7, God through the prophet Nathan tells David, "You're going to have a son, and he will be my son, and I will be his father." And so in the New Testament, when Jesus is called the Son of God, that can mean a lot of different things, but generally it connects Jesus with that promise to David, that Jesus is this son of David, is this king, that this Messiah that was expected to come. And so when we see Son of the Most High in 4Q246, or in the Son of God text in the Dead Sea Scrolls, I tend to interpret in the light of that, where this is talking about some sort of Davidic king, but it could be a superhuman figure. It could be an angelic figure. So all of that long answer to say, I'm not sure. I've always assumed it would be human, but I could be wrong. It could be an angelic figure instead.
Gotcha. Okay, let's move on here with the last question. The fifth question here is showing on your screen, Dr. Stokes. Again, thank you for being here and addressing our questions. So, what sort of images of the Satan emerge in the New Testament?
Yeah, this is kind of where my book ends, and the reason that I end with the New Testament for a couple of different reasons. As I said, I'm a Christian, and my interest is in the Scripture, but that's also my specialization. If I go too much past that, I would be outside of what I'm really competent to deal with. Although the history of theology and Christianity and Judaism, as well as Islam, those are fascinating topics, and Satan makes an appearance in all of these. But my competence is in the Scripture, so that's where I cut off this study. So I finished with the New Testament, and what I find in the New Testament is a diverse portrait of Satan. There are different texts that describe Satan in different ways. Some of the texts, well, let me start here first. The emphasis of many New Testament texts is on Satan as a tempter and deceiver,
Yep.
as God's enemy, as the church's enemy. That's the traditional take on Satan, and part of the reason that's where Christian theology goes with it is that's what the New Testament seems to emphasize. And so if someone were to ask me, is Satan God's enemy? Is Satan the tempter? I would say yes. The New Testament, as from a Bible standpoint, yes, the Bible describes Satan that way. But what I would add is that the New Testament also presents a more complex perspective than that, and that you do have some diversity in the New Testament. And there are some texts that continue to speak of Satan also in this earlier fashion, Satan as someone who punishes sinners on God's behalf. And so I'm thinking just of a couple of examples off the top of my head. One of them is 1 Corinthians 5. Paul is writing a letter to the church in Corinth, one of his several letters to Corinth, and this is a church that is experiencing a number of challenges, one of which is the fact that a member of their church is sleeping with his stepmom, apparently sleeping with his father's wife. And Paul says, look, you've got to deal with this. You can't let this go unaddressed in the church. And Paul says, you should hand this person over to Satan so that the flesh will be destroyed, but his spirit saved. And what seems to be in mind there, that's actually language from the Septuagint, or the Greek translation of Job, where God hands Job into Satan's hands. And Paul is saying, hand this person over to Satan so that Satan can afflict this person physically, I think. But hopefully this will turn this person around spiritually. That seems to be, at least that's a plausible interpretation of what's going on there in 1 Corinthians 5. Another passage also in Paul's letters in 2 Corinthians, so a different letter to the same church. But in this passage, Paul is talking about a number of visions that he's received. And he says to keep him from becoming prideful, to keep him from becoming puffed up or inflated over these visions, there's given him a thorn in the flesh. And commentators have had all kinds of thoughts about what this thorn in the flesh might be. It does seem to me to be some sort of physical affliction, a physical condition. But he says this thorn in the flesh is a messenger of Satan, or in the Greek, an angel, an angelos of Satan, to keep him from becoming puffed up. keep him from becoming prideful, perhaps, over his visions. And so here, apparently, God sends an angel of Satan to afflict Paul physically to keep him in line spiritually. And there are other passages that seem also to refer to this idea of Satan as someone who harms people physically, punishes sinners, even can be used to put Christians in their place physically. So you have lots of different views that kind of complement one another. The New Testament portrait of Satan is one that is really complex and fascinating. And actually, I like that a whole lot as a Christian, as a believer myself, because from my own experience and from the experiences of others, I know that evil and suffering and sin are really complex topics, and a simplistic explanation of these things would be inadequate. And so I am encouraged by the fact that in the scriptures we have a very complex explanation of evil and sin and suffering, and a complex take on Satan, because only a complex explanation is sufficient to deal with such a complex problem in our lives.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Stokes. So we're going to go with one question here. I think this is one of yours, Joshua. This is the last one here. So basically, it goes like this. Can it be argued that early Christians in the New Testament period believed in the existence of more than one Satan or adversarial figure, given Paul's reference to Belial in 2 Corinthians alongside other traditions that mention Beelzebul, while noting that the dragon of Revelation 12 need not necessarily be identified straightforwardly as the Satan, and that its 7 heads may symbolically represent multiple
I do
adversarial
believe
powers.
this question.
Yeah. I think you already addressed in some ways
I
this question, Dr. Stokes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
I would be. I've
So
talked about. Go ahead.
no, yes, I would prefer to change it in that case to make it
Okay.
a little more interested in this case. Because I did realize that that there is a misconception of the Satan figure on the way that, for example, we know the Greek translation of the Septuagint translate in the case of Job, Satan for diabolos. So we have diablo in Spanish. It's quite common that the people speak about Satan as el diablo, but I'm pretty sure that this is not the first intention of the Satan use of the New Testament. For example, Jesus called Peter Satan, and I'm not sure if he was speaking to the spirit behind him or is he speaking to him. So in this case, I just want to make sure that because I do believe the concept of the divine accuser of the divine council meetings still alive in the New Testament. Well, Revelation chapter 4 is quite clear that that's the divine council there, but I don't know, is the figure of Satan in Revelation chapter 12, it says he was expelled from the heaven, is because he was legally there. I mean, he had the will to be there because God used him somehow. So my question is, we'll go more to that way. Is this active figure in the New Testament, and he's an active figure till exactly when? Because in the Revelation chapter 12, he was expelled, he was cast out from heaven by Michael. So my question is, when this happened? Is he still there, with access to God's throne himself, or this is something that is already like happened ago, and now he's not there? Now he's just ruling the world till Jesus come back. That will be my question in this case.
Yeah, that is such a good question, and I wish that I were more competent as an interpreter of Revelation to give you a very clear, confident answer about it. I can say a couple of things about it, though, Joshua. One is that passage where there's a war in heaven where you have Michael, this positive angelic figure, and his angels on one side of the battle, and you have Satan and another group of angels on the other side of the battle, and Satan is defeated and he's cast out of heaven. So there's no longer a place found for him in heaven. The first thing I would say is that's not an origin story of Satan as a number of interpreters, or a number of, I guess, popular level interpreters assume, but it's a story of Satan's defeat by the church, by Christians, and by Christ, because it says that he's defeated in this battle and cast out of heaven by the blood of the Lamb. So by Christ's death, that accomplishes the defeat, and also by the word of Christ's followers' testimony. So believers, when they're faithful to Christ, they take part in the defeat of Satan and his being cast out of heaven. Now, when exactly that takes place, is that something that happened back in the first century, shortly after the death of Christ, or is that something that's yet to happen in the future? Or is that something that's kind of ongoing? This battle is something that's taking place over time. I'm not sure that I can give you a definite answer about that, but it does seem to suggest that Satan has a role in heaven as the accuser of the brothers. And by accuser, I think what's talking about there is what we have going on in Job, where Satan goes to God and says, hey, God, here are people that are faithful to you. Let me test them to see how faithful they really are. If you go back to chapter 2 or 3 of Revelation, one of the letters to the churches, maybe Thyatira or I can't remember which church it is in chapter 2 or 3 of Revelation. But John tells the church that Satan is going to cast some of them into prison for 10 days to test them. And that seems to be what's going on. Satan goes before God and says, hey, I want to test these people like Job or like this church. And what it seems to say in Revelation, if people are faithful to God because of Christ's blood and because of Christ's followers' faithfulness, that Satan is going to be cast out of heaven and is no longer able to do that. He's no longer going to be able to go before God and cause trouble for the church like that. Now, whether that's already happened or whether that's in the process of happening now, perhaps a Revelation commentator would be able to give you a more definite answer on that. But I think that's what's going on there in chapter 12. It's a fascinating passage. Perhaps maybe the one of the most fundamental passages in the entire book of Revelation, as far as understanding what Revelation is teaching. It's fascinating.
Amazing. Thank you,
Okay.
Doctor, for your answer. It's really good.
Yeah, my pleasure. I've enjoyed this, guys.
So just to come to an end here now, we have a couple of other endorsements from Journal of Theological Studies. It says the book may well induce a paradigm shift on the function of the Satan in early Jewish literature. Then we got the Calvin Theological Journal. The Satan is an excellent authoritative guide for those studying the historical development of Satan, and a must for pastors and professors teaching on the biblical texts that mention the Satan in the Old and New Testaments. Moving forward, Review of Biblical Literature, the big, review arm from Society of Biblical Literature. The book is extremely valuable for the study of Satan, and the contents highlight and bring together helpful insights from a wide range of Jewish texts. Last but not least, Dr. Stokes. Dr. Craig Evans, Houston Christian University. He says, people today are fascinated with the devil, also known as the Satan. But there is a lot of that they don't know, and a lot of that they think they know that is simply not correct. Ryan Stokes has set the record straight in a fascinating and very readable study of the origin of Satan. From the earliest traditions in the Bible to the later and very diverse traditions we find inside and outside the Bible, Stokes provides readers with a reliable guide that will educate and fascinate. That's a good thing to go to end.
That's right. If there's anybody in your family or any friends that you haven't found the perfect Christmas present for yet, this book is ideal for loved ones of all ages.
Yeah. We're gonna plug. We're gonna plug here.
I already bought 2. One for my best friend, one for me. He's reading it. He liked it. He has this weird conclusion about God and stuff, but he likes Satan figures, so I think it's a very, very good selection for it. I do have a last question. That this one is more like a kind of opinion. I as I understand, in my case, because I'm quite aware of this idea of the cherubim of the primal times who rebels against God with the third part of the stars, it actually not come from the Bible. It comes from Milton's Lost Paradise. And in that way, my question will be exactly this one. Uh, as I know, Lucifer is just a Latin word related to trying to translate Hillel Ben Shaddai. That means bright son of the dawn, I think. Um, it could be referring to just a divine rebel, but I don't find the connection either to Genesis and to primal rebellion. But my question is related to this idea too. Uh, who could be the Nahash of Genesis 3? Who is your opinion to who it can be? I know, but the book of Enoch that is called one of the Watchers is that figure. One of the pseudo Jonathan Targum say is Samael, and as I know, the Apocalypse of Abraham say is Azael. So my question is, who do you think is the snake of Genesis 3? This Nahash, and what do you think it means? Is it a divine being or not? And obviously, if you have any connection with Satan.
Yeah, thanks for that question. This is a common one that students ask me when we talk about Genesis or Revelation. It's a great question. Let me think. There are two different ways that I can answer this question, Joshua. One is when Genesis was written, what is the author of Genesis 2 through 3? What does this person have in mind when he's talking about the Nachash, the serpent? Another question is, what do interpreters do with this later? What does John in Revelation 12 have in mind when he says that dragon is Satan, the devil, the serpent of old? And to answer the first question, the author of Genesis probably wasn't thinking of Satan. Genesis never mentions Satan. The Pentateuch never mentions Satan by name. The idea of Satan, this figure that we're talking about, is probably the exilic period or a little later when this idea really first enters Israelite theology. And so it doesn't seem to me that the author of Genesis 2 through 3 could have had Satan in mind. In my mind, he's just talking about a serpent. However, when we get to Revelation, I think now there are a couple of texts in early Judaism who we might that might identify. I'm thinking of the Wisdom of Solomon, a text from the Apocrypha or Deuterocanonical works, may identify the serpent with Satan. It's not clear to me that that's the case, but I think in Revelation 12, for the first time clearly, we have an author who identifies the serpent from Genesis 2 and 3 with Satan. And so this idea did arise. For me, now a third question is, what do I do with this as a Christian theologian? What do I believe happened in the Garden of Eden? Where do I think evil came from? And for me, it makes sense to go with what Revelation says. For me as a Christian, I do believe in Satan. I believe that Satan is somewhat, and I realize that not everyone agrees with me, but in my tradition, I believe what the scriptures teach about evil, and so I believe that Satan exists, and it makes a whole lot of sense to me that Satan would be involved with the origin of sin, the origin of evil, the fall of humanity, humanity's initial rebellion against God. And so it's a multifaceted question. What did the author of Genesis, or what did the author of Genesis 2 through 3 have in mind? What interpretations arose after that time, such as the interpretation of Revelation? And then what do I do with it theologically? And in my mind, I'm very comfortable connecting Satan with the fall of humankind, even though I would acknowledge that that's probably not what the author of Genesis 2 through 3 had in mind himself.
I agree. I mean, I personally, Dr. Stokes, I don't share the method in which we are retrojecting ideas, later develop ideas into the text, because I think it's methodologically flawed, and we need to be very careful not to be reading our thoughts and ideas into the text. So, for example, there are people who want to read the Trinity in Genesis 1:26, and I'm like, no, That's not possible. Let's not do that. You can believe in the Trinity, that's fine, but let's be careful. I think it was Calvin or Martin Luther who wrote about that. Oh, it's clearly the Trinity here. Let's do humanity in our image. No, that's not the Trinity. I think, and I don't know if you agree with this, Dr. Stokes. I think it's Yahweh speaking to the divine council, the heavenly court. That's my view. I think it makes more sense of the text and the context, the religious context of the text itself. But again, getting back to what you just said, I personally think there is evil, and as my mentor used to say, the late Michael Heiser, there is intelligent evil out there who is bent on the destruction of humanity in whatever ways. And we Christians, our worldview is that there is evil. Now, our God, the creator of the universe, he's the big guy, and nobody is more powerful than him. He's the Almighty. And but he's letting he used to exemplify this by putting the chess metaphor. God is in one end, the bad guys on the other end, and he's like, okay, I want to let you play, do whatever move you want to do, but I just want to let you know in advance, I'm gonna get my way anyway. Okay, so so I kind of like that, but yeah, I agree with you. There is evil, and that's what the Christian worldview, at least from the text, is trying to convey to us. The first people in the first century, of course, but we here in the 21st century is something that we can see. And many atheists. I don't know if you have think about this, Dr. Stokes, but many atheists, they go around this argument. Why is there evil, such enormous evil in the world? I mean, Bob Ehrman, he's a good example of this. He's going like, okay, if God exists, why is there evil? Why is so is there so much suffering in the world? And I think, as you said, there is something behind the curtain. The Bible gives some glimpse, not the whole picture, because He decided that not giving out all the details, just a couple of ideas. But I truly personally believe that there is something behind the curtain, pulling the strings, as they say, in the political and social around the world. Joshua, any last comments?
Yes, my
I'm
last
not
comment
okay.
is, what do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Do you hear me? Great, Doctor. Well, I mean, I love your book; it's amazing. I like it. But my question is, if you're open to an interview to speak of the book with the school I work with in the channel, and if you are open to let me be your interpreter,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd
because
love to speak with your students if they're
as I
interested.
say, many people. I mean, we are lucky that we already have it in Spanish, so we don't have to
Yeah, that's
ask
a
for
good
it.
thing.
And the second is, I do believe this conversation we have today, it should be the people's speaking about to into Christian world, because the problem is, I understand the scholarship in English is quite advanced, and some people is already related to some concept, but the Latin world, the Hispanic world, in Spanish, they see these books, and I'm being honest with this. When I saw the Kerygma, not this publisher is Christian. When I saw this Kerygma was publishing this book, I say, "Oh, that's a good job," because normally I don't see this kind of book ever at all. I see angels, yeah, good books, but not deep, deep, deep. I already have the update edition of the Council Realm of Michael Heiser there, and I can say that, wow, good. But my favorite book is not actually that one. My favorite book is Demons, because Michael Heiser explained very well demons and many concepts and stuff. And when I see this book of Satan and I saw it in Spanish, I bought it straight away. So I will say is, if you will be open to an interview to talk about the book straight away in Spanish, with obviously Spanish questions, I will translate it into English and I will interpret to you. Are you open to it? You would like to?
Yeah, if I can help, especially Spanish speaking students that might not have access to some of this information, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, I'd be honored to accept that invitation.
Great,
Okay,
great. So have it there.
that's a good thing. That's a good. The more we can spread the word, the better. I like that. I kind of like that. So, Dr. Stokes, here's the book. And in this book, Heiser quotes your dissertation, which is called, let me see, it's called Rebellious Angels and Malicious Spirits, Explanations of Evil in the Enochic and Related Literature, PhD dissertation, Yale University, 2010.
The
So,
myth of the revelation of the rebellious angels from more civic is his.
yeah, no, not sure. Have you published with More Civic, Dr. Stokes?
Not a book. More Seebeck. I may have published an article with in like in
Okay.
a edited volume. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the book. So, Dr. Stokes, again, this has been an awesome. Thank you for sharing your time. I know you have a very busy agenda there, scheduled and everything. Any last comments or thoughts for our audience here watching this episode?
No, thanks for what you're doing. I appreciate the opportunity to get the word out there about my work. One thing that you may know or may not know about scholarship is when you write books, you don't make a lot of money unless you're someone like Bart Ehrman. You don't make a lot of money. The reason that you do it is to contribute to a conversation and to spread ideas. And so I thank you for the opportunity to make my ideas available to more people.
Well,
No,
I
that's true.
hope that you see something about my acquisition of that book, because as I say, this kind of book, I'm very well. Marv knows this. I push a lot my students and my friends and the teachers and everybody to buy the books. They try to find them. Please don't pirate them, and to help the scholar behind him, like have this kind of material. And happily, we have it into Spanish already, so that means we don't have to ask for it. So go for it, study the book, and please try to get it. So I don't know if you see something of that a percentage, but what I'm saying is to if we can help you to make a contribution to the people know your work, come with us, with us.
Yeah, yep. Okay, everyone, thank you. Thank you for being here. This has been awesome. Again, Dr. Stokes, thank you for addressing our questions. We have a lot of questions, of course. Every time we have an interview with scholars, we we left the interview with more questions than answers because that's the nature of the things we're studying. But we thank God that you scholars, you're doing the hard work. You're writing books, putting articles. I forgot, and this is on me, but I forgot to put some clips and videos, images about your articles because those articles are quite interesting to read. The way you address these questions about those very, uh, puzzling passages about Satan. Is it God? Is it the angel? Which one is it? So I forgot to put those clips. But maybe I can what I can do is that I can get the links from your academia page and just go and put it there in the notes of this video. So people who is interested enough, they can click on it and go and read it for themselves. With Dr. Stokes, Joshua, we say until the next time, everybody, take care. Bye now.
Thank you, guys.